everyone, this is Melissa Keller, Director of Events and Project Management for Vineyard Worship. Roll Like a River is Vineyard Worship's latest single from the upcoming EP, Vineyard Soul, The Chicago Sessions. Produced by gospel heavyweights Calvin Rogers and Philip Feaster, and featuring Tina Colon Williams' urgent and passionate vocal, Roll Like a River is a timely anthem and a petition for the kingdom of God to flood and fill the cracks of our broken society.
I see a change gon' come. I see a justice roll like a river. I see a kingdom come. Oh, I see a justice roll like a river. Let your kingdom come. Let your will be done. Let your justice roll like a river. Every king and crown, let them be cast down till your justice rolls like a river. Let your justice roll like a river.
Find Roll Like a River and all of our releases wherever you listen to music.
The Ferment.
I think the caution for me is don't lose yourself in Church Incorporated. Are so many vacuous holes that want to suck you down it and take you places that you're like, I'm not built for this. And I think I had to learn that kind of the hard way because I'm kind of a solitary person in many ways. I'm an introvert, 5 and 6 and that kind of thing. But when you give up that part that Christ actually called you in and to, like me, that was so profound where God found me. And then when I come into church, there's seemingly this pressure, the push. I wish I had learned early on that we need to free people to be who they are in their gifting and then adapt around it.
Welcome to the Ferment Podcast, conversations about worship and transformation. Today's guest is pastor and competitive surfer Tim Holt.
All right, what's up, everybody? Adam here. This is the Ferment Podcast. And today, my special guest is Tim Holt, all the way from the coast, surfing man. How you doing, Tim?
Doing good, Adam. The right coast.
The right coast. Correct. Tim, I'm excited to have this conversation for all kinds of reasons. And there will be, I think, a point to this conversation. But I don't really even want to start there. I want to start here. I know you're a pastor, long-term pastor, but I also know you're a surfer. And I think surfing's cool. I don't really know anything about surfing. I surfed one time in Hawaii. It was really fun. Talk to me about surfing. Let's just start there.
Man, surfing. How can I say this? I've been surfing for 56 years.
Whoa.
And surfing put me in the position of meeting Jesus at a surfing contest. Back at May 1st, 1971 in North Carolina. Wasn't looking for Jesus, but he met me in a hotel room at a surfing contest. And surfing probably saved me from the 60s, actually.
Really?
Yeah, because 60s were beautiful in so many ways, but so challenging in other ways. And I think surfing kept me in the water. It kept me healthy.
Yeah.
And not too many people around here were doing that. It was a sport that people didn't know much about whenever I started. And so it was kind of my thing, a few of us. And so it's where you can do it on your own too. You don't have to have anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, if waves are there, you go.
Yeah.
It's great physical workout. And to me, it's spiritual as well. And
I believe it. So that surfing contest, was that in Wilmington?
That was in Atlantic Beach, North Carolina, up near Morehead City.
Okay.
It was the East Coast Surfing Championships, or the kind of I guess you would call it. We had different contests up and down the coast, and this one took us up that way. And so a friend of mine split me and my brother up. Because they knew they wouldn't have a chance with my brother and I together sharing Jesus. So they split us up. I rode up with one guy, my brother rode up with the other guy, stayed in 2 different hotel rooms. And I'm in the corner meditating and stuff. And my friend Danny says, "What are you doing?" And then he tells me about Jesus. And Adam, it's just something I never got over. I mean, it's like the light switch went on. It wasn't emotional, but it was this clarity of just, I was about to get married too in 3 months. And so I called her on the phone. I called Karen on the phone and told her, I said, "Oh, it's amazing. I met Jesus." You know?
And what did she think?
She thought at first I was so passionate, maybe I had joined a cult. But
Hey, it was the 60s.
yeah, and I wasn't, the only time I ever went to church, I went once when I was a kid. And I mean, I was raised in the Bible Belt, but I only went once or twice as a kid. My mom was not a church-going person, and my dad kind of was. And so in order to date her, I had to go to church with her. And so that was my exposure, was going to church during that year or so before we got married.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
I love that story. But even a moment ago, you said there's something spiritual about surfing. And I was going to ask you maybe something like that, because there's this guy, I don't know why I'm fascinated with him, but I'm sort of fascinated with this guy named Laird Hamilton.
Oh yeah, what a beast!
What a beast, right? Like the big wave surfer guy. So I'm fascinated with Laird for a couple reasons. One, he does something that's scary and it's inspiring, and then 2, he's not a young guy and he's so fit, and I feel inspired by that. As somebody who's getting older, I feel like, yeah, maybe I can still keep this thing together. But then also, I've heard Laird talk sometimes, and sometimes when he talks about surfing, it's elegant, it's borderline philosophical. And you use the word spiritual. I think that's a good word. So I would just love to hear, you riff. Like what is elegant or spiritual or philosophical about surfing? Because you've been doing it for all these years.
Yeah, elegant is a good word too, most of the time.
Yeah.
Surfing's gone. I've been blessed enough to be through all the phases of surfing, from the longboard era right on through the experimental era, different boards, and now short boards. Now it's gone full circle. And so there is something very unique about being on a wave. I was trying to think about this before we talked. You're a musician, so I guess this would be a kind of a way to explain it. It's like if someone put some sheet music up in front of you.
Yeah.
Every measure would change timing and key. And you had to adapt on the fly. You didn't get a rehearsal. You had to change every single measure. And it changed keys. It changed, timing. Every wave is unique. It moves, it grows, it swells, it closes out. The surfer is adapting to that rhythm, constantly trying to find the flow, or what we call the glide, right through the middle of it. And there is something very, I don't know how to describe it. There's a peaceful, almost womb-like feel, when you're in that zone, when things are going right. Not to mention you're out in nature, or you're in the ocean and sea life. I mean, I've seen whales 50 feet from me breach, and things like that just amazing.
Well, when you were talking there, Tim, you were sort of mixing those metaphors between surfing and music. I couldn't help but think of jazz. Like it feels like you're talking about jazz.
That's exactly right. I have even written this down before, that it's more like jazz than rock, because there's a lot of improvisation going on and kind of adapting to the other parts that are coming at you, and you're kind of playing off of each other. So it's like jazz. That's
okay.
right.
Well, I don't mean to be too granular here, and I know there's some other things I want to talk to you about, but maybe one more surfing question. You said you used the word glide. That maybe is some surfer language here. Tell me what that is. You said in the glide. What is that?
Yeah, well, it's like you feel almost in the pit of your stomach. There's a rhythmic movement to it, and you feel this line, even though you're up and down and back and around. There's this connection. There's no brokenness in that. There is like one piece of music, and like you began, there's might be some rest when you stall a little bit, then you move back into the next one. and there's a glide. Older surfers call it that.
Yeah.
Because that's what gave us the stoke, was when you're right in that place and you feel it and you sense it, and it's a full body experience, as well as, I don't know, you're all alone in that moment,
That's
even
right.
though there might be 50 people out surfing with you. It's until a kook drops in on you and then ruins your whole,
Oh,
fun
man.
play.
Oh, man. Well, the other thing that it makes me think of, I don't surf. I have one time, so I know nothing about surfing. But my sons and I, we do ride mountain bikes. We love to go to Western North Carolina and ride mountain bikes. We love to go to the Pisgah Forest and, as they say in mountain biking, earn our turns. So suffer these giant mountains on the way up and then ride them down. And one of the very cool things about mountain biking, especially when you're in the big mountains, is you lose sense of like space and time. You're only in this moment. And if you get out of the moment, you could really crash and hurt yourself or ruin your day, if not your month, But there's something really exhilarating about being in nature, doing something that so focuses you in a particular moment. And it's like communal, like I'm with my sons or with some friends, but then it's individual. It's a very strange thing.
Yeah, and I started mountain biking about 6-7 months ago. And my son, when I retired, he's like, "Dad, we're getting on the bike." So he started buying me stuff,
Yeah.
And my record in mountain biking is not that great right now. I ran into a tree. Let's see, just a couple of days ago, I fell jumping a rock and, kind of burnt my front tire, and it went out when I was coming down. So I go over, so my hand's a little messed up.
Man.
So I haven't found the glide yet in the mountain biking, but
Tim,
I will.
I'm telling you, you will. It will happen.
Yeah.
It will happen. Well, man, thanks for sharing about surfing with us, because I'm really interested in that. I meet I meet mountain bikers, I meet rock climbers, and I meet surfers. And there's some kind of kindred thing in those communities. I don't know what it is, but it's there, and I'm just infinitely interested in them.
Good.
Yeah.
Those are great sports, all of them. Yeah.
I agree. All right. Hey, let's shift gears. Let's talk about pastoring.
All right.
You're a vineyard pastor. You just recently retired. You pastored for a good long while. So I'm really excited to maybe have you share some wisdom with us. But can you just start by telling us how long you were a pastor?
43 years.
And why did you become a pastor?
That's a really good question. I don't have this amazing moment where people go, "I felt the call." And every time I talk with someone about this, I'm like, my call, and I say this with all honesty and sincerity, my call began May 1st, 1971. And so every step that my wife and I have taken on that journey, it led to this. It wasn't like I was headed there. It just led to it. We were like trying to walk with God in their everyday life. And in the 70s, we saw a tremendous amount of kids off the street, surfers. I mean, I don't know how many surfers just prayed to accept Christ out in the water, and the wintertime, we're all suited up. And I remember one guy goes, "Hey, aren't you supposed to be baptized after you become a Christian?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Will you baptize me?" I mean, we're in wetsuits in the middle of the ocean in December. So we shot our boards to the beach and I baptized him. And on his baptism certificate, I wrote to Mickey Bass, the waves were 2 to 3 feet, glassy. And then I said, "You were baptized," and gave him the certificate like a week later. We did that off the cuff without much church involvement for probably 7-8 years. Then we realized we really needed to be committed to a church. And then once we got involved in the church, eventually a pastor looked at us and said, "Hey, would you guys come on staff?" And I'm like, "Yeah, doing this all the time would be cool. I'd be able to read and study and meet with people. Yeah. That would be really cool." And so we went on our first pastorate, and it was very rocky.
Yeah.
Very.
Well, let me just jump in here. I love the stories you're telling because they seem so organic. So is what I'm hearing in your story, Tim, like you meet Jesus, you have, like the light came on, I think is what you said. It wasn't super emotional, but the light came on. And then are you just kind of like a natural evangelist? Is that what I'm hearing in your story? Like you're just telling people about Jesus, or is there something supernatural where people are kind of like coming to you and you have gravity, or is it some of both? Talk to me about that, because I'm always interested in that dynamic.
I think it's a little of both. It's something that, being honest, being a pastor kind of challenged me, because I thought about this a lot. It was so easy early on. I mean, you were just who you were, and you looked for opportunities and you took advantage of them, or you created. If they weren't there, we just made the opportunity somehow. But then when you get in church, it's almost like it becomes, there's a structure to it. And I like some order, but I like some chaos too. And because there's energy in chaos. And so in all confession, I probably have been a lot more comfortable around non-Christians than professional Christians, and not to be demeaning, but my own comfort level of being able to have a conversation or feel at home in some sorts.
Yeah.
That's really never left me, even though, matter of fact, I don't know if I need to say this now, but when I retired, some of my surfing friends, when they would call me on the phone and leave a message, I took off pastor of Seacoast Vineyard Church off of it. And one of them said, "Man, it's so weird calling you now, not to hear that." And he said, "But you know what that means? That means you're all ours."
That's right.
So I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool.
I actually like that. I love that, because what I hear in that story, Tim, even in that guy's response, is I hear the work of the Spirit. Like there's this, like you are a pastor because it's what God does in you. And I hear him even responding to you like, "Oh, like you're all ours." What I hear in that is like, "Oh, you're one of us." And like, there's somebody here who's going to like be with us, care for us, know us, do our thing. Yeah.
I love that community. It started with those guys. And I felt like the Lord said, this is years ago, it started me and you. It's going to end with me and you, Tim. I'm like, yep.
Yeah.
And he said, but you started with this community, and that's the way you're going to close this out.
Man.
That's kind of exciting, And so I did a paddle out for some friends of someone that died. I've done a bunch of them. But you know what a paddle out is for surfers? I have no
clue. Tell me.
It's the most sacred assembly for surfers. We gather on the beach. We take a carnation and the ashes and bags, and we stand on the beach and we'll have a prayer. Well, I do with everybody.
Yeah.
And we all paddle out in the water with the ashes, with the flowers. We get in a circle out beyond the waves breaking. Yeah. We all link up arms. Then we go around the circle. Everybody says something about the person that has passed.
Oh, man.
And then when it comes back to the person that started, we all throw our flowers in the center of the circle and we start hooting and splashing water. That's our send-off.
Yeah.
And I get chills now. I've done I don't know how many of them. And just 2 weeks ago, I got the call to go help do one. And the guy introducing me to the people says, Tim used to be a pastor. And then Tommy, one of the guys I've known since he was 14, says, what do you mean used to? He's our pastor now.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
So, we'll see.
I love that. Well, and even that image of paddling out and getting in a circle with the ashes, and it feels like church, feels tribal would be another word.
Yeah, when you get out too, you can't hear. When you get out past the breakers, you don't hear anything on the beach.
Mm.
It's just the water rising and that community of people together, looking at each other, celebrating the life of the person.
Mm. It's a cathedral.
It is exactly. And the congregation has gathered, and it's more like a Quaker thing. People go from one to the next, whoever wants to say something. And then
do you have to squeeze the person's hand if you don't want to talk?
Well, you just go, and there's no pressure ever. It's just like point to the next person and they go. And so,
I love that. What a beautiful picture. Well, okay, so it just sounds like becoming pastor was natural. I'll use the word accident. You can change my word if you want.
Yeah, it was next step.
Yeah.
It was a day by day. I'm very much in the moment person, so it's like, all right, let's do this. And so
Okay.
we step into it, and it lasted a while.
Yeah. So talk to me about finding the vineyard. I'm assuming that you weren't initially a vineyard person, or that wasn't your introduction to church or ministry.
No, I wish it was,
Yeah.
The first exposure to the vineyard was Wimber, and that was in Ridgecrest at a conference back in the mid-'80s. I think Oral Roberts was speaking. I was playing in the worship band for the conference, about 2,000 of us, and Oral Roberts was there, Jamie Buckingham, and then Wimber, who I'd never heard of, came up and spoke, and he had this stack of papers, and he just started reading what God was doing all over the world. He just said, in Brazil, blah, 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 healings, blah, 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 blah. Then he turned most boring thing in the world and just kept reading these facts. And then he closed it up, put it in his little briefcase satchel thing. And he said, now the Holy Spirit's going to come. And we're all like, we thought he was already here. What's this guy saying? And man, he just started, he said a few words of prophecy about someone getting healed over here in the balcony. And the place ended up crazy chaos. And he just folded up everything and walked off the stage and left it like that. And that we were just like, who is this guy? I mean,
Yeah.
And then years later, of course, the music. I was a worship pastor for 16 years. And of course, when I came in touch with the music, it was the best I had ever. I mean, gosh, David and Brian, all these guys that were writing the music. And I brought it into our church, and we sang it. Then Karen and I started going to Columbus Vineyard for conferences. We'd drive up. And then I did a conference in North Carolina with a friend who's, I think it's his wife's first cousin, was Dan Wilt.
Mm.
So Dan is up there. I'm up there. We're coming through a very tough time church-wise, getting hurt, all kind of stuff. And so we share with Dan what's going on, and I still have his Apostles' Creed songbook where he wrote on the inside of it, God's going to redeem this, basically, and in his time, Tim, it's going to be okay. And I remind him every time I see him, I'm like, Dan, thank you for that word.
Yeah. Shout out to Dan.
Yeah, and then we started pursuing the vineyard. We got invited to a pastor's retreat up in North Carolina, and we were broken people, and we went in there, and we had never been received the way we were by anybody. I mean, it was incredible, and nobody talked about the size of their church. I didn't know if the person was what size, what church, or who they were. And Joel Balin asked me, he said, did you bring a guitar? I said, yeah. He goes, well, help me lead worship.
Mm.
First time I ever met him, I'm thinking, who are people like this?
Yeah.
So I sit there and play, probably 25 of us, 30 of us. Then Joel walks over and says, I want to pray for you. John Wimber prayed for me. I want to give you what Wimber gave me for worship. And he laid hands on me. That was 1997.
Yeah.
Says, I want to pray for you. So the connections just started happening. And Thor Kohlberg, Thor was kind of the guy I went to. And Thor started inviting me to everything, got me involved in leadership early on, way early on. And that was it. We were home. I love the vineyard. People get sick of me saying it, but I do. Yeah, we're like a herd of cats, but this is who I belong to. This is who I'm going to be.
So Tim, when did you plant your church?
1997.
Oh man. So like you leave that pastor's meeting, Joel has prayed for you, and you go right to work.
Immediately. We had started another church in 81, and we were there for 16 years. Like I said, then it's too much to go into. But then we said, vineyard, yeah. So we went and started a church, just Karen and I. And I called every surfer and every musician I knew in the area, and they all came out. And it was great. I had 110 people first Sunday. People came out.
Well, and that just shows like how important it is to be a part of the community, isn't it? It's have a life outside of church. That's part of what I'm hearing in your story. You have a life inside of church, but you also have this life of Jesus and ministry that extends beyond the walls.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's because the way the way Christ got me, in that hotel room surfing, and me not even hardly seeking for anything like that. And I think the fact that he did that for me, Adam.
Yeah.
I just honestly have never got over it. I've never got over it.
I love
It's,
it.
it's as fresh right now, right here in this moment, as it was May 1st.
I can tell you're emotional.
I don't know why I did it, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, I hear it. Well, let me circle back something you said a moment ago. You said you went to that Wimber meeting in Ridgecrest. So you're like in Black Mountain, North Carolina or whatever. And and you said Wimber comes and just reads the words, and it's like, and then he's like, the Holy Spirit's going to come, and the room, you use the word chaos, right? Yeah. And so far, I think you've used the word chaos twice in this conversation. Earlier you said, it can't be too much structure. I like chaos. So when the chaos erupted around Wimber, did you like it, or were you scared? Were you put off by it?
No, I wasn't put off. I mean, I was a part of a charismatic church then anyway.
Okay.
And it was just, I had never seen it handled that way.
What was unique?
Handled, I mean, like, there's no control. There's no, because when Oral Roberts was there, it was a lot different. So when John came, though, it was like he trusted the Spirit to handle things in the midst of this group. And I mean, people were dancing, people were laughing, people were crying. Jamie Buckingham had cancer. I don't even know who that is, but he was a pretty prolific writer and all during that time. He had cancer during that time. And I remember watching him and his wife, Jackie, dance on the floor, jumping up and down until he collapsed in her arm. I mean, he was going to die not long from then, but they were just laughing together. And she was holding him right in the middle of that conference floor. And I was like, I've never seen it. Everything usually is so programmed and so not in order or in order, even in some charismatic churches. I just had never seen anything like it.
Yeah, you even said Wimber trusted the Spirit. And by that you mean he let the room just kind of do its thing. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, he did. He kind of, and now I know this is what I remember.
Yeah.
Is when he just very humbly walked off. Now, he did have a suit on.
Okay, talk to me about that.
He did have a suit on. Yeah, because he knew he was coming to this gathering of leaders, charismatic leaders.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't remember the exact name of it. So he did have a suit on. And I guess, I don't know if he was with Fuller during that period of time or not, but it's like maybe 84, something like that, 85. Yeah, it was very unique. What I liked about it is it reminded me of the 70s when I would go into a meeting with a bunch of kids, and these kids would just be like crying, some hurt, and we'd sit down, we'd pray with them, and there was no rhyme or reason, there was no plan, but tons of kids came to Christ and all of that during that process of seeming chaos. So anyway, it was very interesting, and I can't believe that just 10 years later, I would be going to Columbus and checking it out and getting to know people, because I didn't have that in my plan when I left that conference at all. So,
all right, so if you planted your church in 97, that had to be around the time John died. So like, how did you feel? Like you're going out to plant a church, and then, the guy who's driving the buses died. Yeah. Like, was that weird, or was that like, okay, we have such a clear word from God, we're okay?
It was a little weird, but at the same time, the contacts I had were Dan, Joel, Thor, people like that. So those were the actual personalities that I knew and people that I had met. And so while I had read and listened to all kind of things that John had written and recordings, it was the people, like when we went to that first gathering in the mountains with just 25, whatever people, it was the way they treated us. And then our first going to being invited into things. And they told me when I said, hey, I'm going to do a vineyard church. Well, John says you got to hang out for 2 years. And I was like, I'll hang out for 2 years, but I'm still starting a church. This is what God said, do it. Yeah. And Thor said, do it. Do what God told you to do. And so we did, but we got accepted into the vineyard within. I had 2 people tell me nobody's come in as quick as we have. And I think we got in like a month. I did all the reading. I wrote the reports for the kingdom of God, read these stuff, all this. sent it in, and then Johnny Chris calls me on the phone and goes, "Hey, Vineyard Pastor, you're in," that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so we got in pretty quick.
Beautiful.
And yeah.
Let's maybe do a little reflection here. You've been a pastor for a long time and a vineyard pastor for a long time as well. Talk to me about what seems important. Like you've done the work for a long time. What seems important? And I guess what I'm saying here is you're talking to a lot of worship leaders and pastors here. After many years of doing the work, what seems important to you still?
I think the caution for me is don't lose yourself in Church Incorporated. Are so many vacuous holes that want to suck you down it and take you places that you're like, I'm not built for this. And I think I had to learn that kind of the hard way, because I'm kind of a solitary person in many ways. I'm an INTJ. I'm an introvert, 5 and 6 and that kind of thing. But when you give up that part that Christ actually called you in and to, like me, that was so profound where God found me. And then when I come into church, there's seemingly this pressure, the push. I wish I had learned early on that how can I say this? We need to free people to be who they are in their gifting, and then adapt around it how that can be supportive, and not say, well, that's a senior. He's a pastor. He's a senior pastor. There's a level probably in that church where he's not going to be a senior pastor anymore. Maybe he needs to keep teaching, need to pour him or herself out, but maybe it's time for a different leader or someone else to come in instead of trying to press and force people into this, what we think is the definition of a pastor.
Yeah.
And that really concerns me with a lot of young people and a lot of young pastors. I want to see them free to be who they are in probably their purest sense when they came to know Christ. That freedom is the thing that really, the fire goes off in their heart, when they think about it. I don't think we need to clamp that down and put structure around it as much as we need to free it somehow.
Well, and what I'm hearing you say there a little bit is like sometimes there's a one-size-fits-all approach, and it can be very damaging.
Absolutely. Yeah, to the pastor's family as well as the church. Sometimes, because as humans we get irritated. Pastors do, and they say the wrong thing, and all the time there's these expectations. It is a calling, if you want to call it that, or a falling, which is kind of what happened to me. I fell into it. It's fraught with landmines all around it constantly. We've got to be able to do this a better way and a healthier way.
Yeah.
And I'm all for learning to lead better. I don't think that's a bad thing, but it can't be the primary thing, because if there's no people, there's no ministry. So it has to be people. You got to learn how to get along with people, even if you're an introvert, and even if you've got to be able to do that. And then when we grasp all these other things that are being thrown at us, we fail to be what we are. And I think that's a shame.
It is. I hear that, and I think if I'm just reflecting on my own story, I think it took me a while to realize that I didn't have to be like my predecessor. and that and my approach didn't have to be the same, and we could change things, and I could lean on people in a different way. I'm even thinking of my associate pastor right now. Like, Andrew just has gifts that I don't have, and thank God, right? Like, and thank God, and Emily and Glenn and the team that are around me, they're really absorbing a lot of my deficiencies.
Mm-hmm.
And what's odd about it is that those are their sweet spots. It's not as though I'm having them pick up my bags that I just didn't want to pick up, or like whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's probably took me, gosh, close to like 7 or 8 years to realize, I don't have to do that, whatever that is.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, talk to me about this. You've done ministry for a really long time. How did you keep your heart alive? That's the question I ask a lot of people. Like, maybe there was a season you didn't. I don't know.
Well, yeah, there were seasons. There were seasons when it was very dry and depressing. 8 years ago, I realized something's not right. I'm not enjoying this. I've got some baggage coming from somewhere, and I wasn't sure. Now, your wife or your husband, they kind of know, as I think Bob Mumford said, wives know things before the Holy Spirit does sometimes.
Yeah.
And they know when they watch you and they love you. And we've been married for 50 years here past month. And so she knew, and that I wasn't happy, something not right. And so I went and got help, I went and talked to a professional counselor. And man, I took a month off, and she had me read through the story of Joseph and to meditate on that story through the whole 30 days. And that helped me tremendously. Because I realized that at my core, I'm still, from good or bad, May 1st, 1971. And if I take that out of my heart, if I take that love for the people that I was around, I'd shrivel up. I'm at heart, probably, if there is a gift of evangelism, that's probably more my heart.
Yeah.
I pastor to the people who don't realize they need to be pastored, or might not even be Christians yet.
Yeah. Well, I read, it was kind of in my little text for my sermon a couple of weeks ago. I was kind of working out that passage where Jesus says, I came for the sick. I came for the people who know they're sinners, not the ones who think they're righteous. And even as I was prepping for it, my heart was just so cut, Mm-hmm. First of all, I was like, oh, Jesus, I just need you to know I'm sick. Number one, I'm still sick. Please help me, Lord. But then also, just in the last few years, I've noticed that there's just been grace with people who are far from Jesus, especially people at my gym.
Yeah.
We've been having so much favor with people from our gym. Just like, just people who are not really church people, and God just keeps giving us grace with them.
That's great.
And it's an amazing thing. It's just I'm not working at this, but there's something here happening, and I don't know. It's a fun thing.
Go with it, and that, I think church got so busy for me that those times of being available to, like you, with people in the gym and me with people in the water, it became less and less because more was required of me at the church, and rightfully so. But my heart was kind of shriveling because I was like, well, what about my friend so-and-so, that's at the surf shop right now? And how about this guy and that guy? If I didn't see people respond, and people have different opinions about altar calls or people raising their hand, but if I didn't have people raise their hand or somehow respond, I really got depressed. I was like, wow, what am I doing here? Why am I not seeing people come to know this beautiful Savior that captured my heart in May 1st? Why is this not happening? Why am I not seeing it? And that, I think, was the struggle of my pastoring. With that part of it, as well as some baggage from my childhood and things that we all kind of end up having to deal with one way or the other.
We do.
And so, yeah, that was like, I'll tell you this, one guy I've been praying for 35 years. This guy has made my surfboards for the last 32 years. We've been on surf trips. His son right now is one of the hottest surfers in the world. And the other day, he sends me this text. He goes, Tim, I think you'll appreciate this. He said, I'm surfing with my 2 sons, and I looked up in the sky, and I said, thank you, God. Now, that's a huge step for him, because he continually asks me questions. I mean, whether we're in Puerto Rico, Costa Rica, here, wherever, he's always asking. He's not there yet. But I got his name in my bathroom right there when I get up in the mornings, where I remember to pray for him. And I love him. He's very dear to me. And that really, that is total Stokesville.
Yeah.
Right there,
Well,
you know.
And I love this image of you being like wanting people to respond to the message or an altar call. Kind of what I hear in your story there is like, on the one hand, like if something's not happening in my church ministry, I'm a little depressed because stuff happens in the water.
Yep.
Right? Like I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but as you're talking, that's kind of what I'm feeling. Like, it's in the water. I want it to be in, yeah.
Yeah. Everybody's made differently and everybody's called, and I get that. But that part of my heart, man, when I see somebody respond, to whether they're weeping, I mean, it doesn't have to be emotional, but whether they raise their hand and they're like me and like, yes, yes, yes. And then I hear from them later, like, wow, that was a moment for me. I can go a few more 100 miles, once I see that in action. But when we become so introverted and there's not a sense of that, because people who haven't met God yet, to me, are like fresh kindling on the fire. They bring a warmth and a fire to the community, because that's why we're here. If there's no people, there's no ministry. It's not meant to be anything other than about Christ and the people. Yeah. And so and I love, there's lots of pastoring things I loved, and I'm so grateful that God allowed me to do it. My wife and I, for so long, we've been with people in hard times. We've prayed with people dying. We've buried them. We've been there for births. We've been there for all kinds of things. And I'm grateful that we were able to do that. But at the core of our being, it almost still goes back to those days of having a bunch of skate rats and surfer people in the house or in our car.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to read through the book of Acts. And so we'd sit in my car at Cape Hatteras and we'd read a section and everybody would go, whoa, does that still go on? You think we could see that? Yeah. This is before the vineyard. I'd go, hey, it's in the book. Let's do it. And then we would just, be open to doing it. And I don't know. I like that.
No, I love that. And Tim, the thing that just seems highlighted to me in our conversation is kind of this note that if you're leading worship or if you're a pastor, it's really important to know what makes your heart come alive. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah. I mean, all of us have to preach or lead worship at times when we're just not in it. I mean, let's be honest.
Sure.
I've preached multiple services and I've watched my mind drift in the middle of a sermon to, I wonder how the waves are. When's the high tide? Let's see. Let me look at my watch. Ooh, It's low tide. I still got 4 hours before I have to get in the water. Yeah. I'm good. I mean, and that kind of thing of pulling yourself back to the center. So, yeah. It's the main thing for each of us. I know it's Christ, but it's probably pretty customized for you.
Yeah.
And for me, I mean, it's not happenstance that how we came to know Jesus, what he did in our lives in the early days. Those are not just markers past. They're reminders of the present and the future for us, of what God has done and wants to continue to do in our lives. And so I love it. I love to see people that don't quite get it yet, to give you a little bit of time, where you can listen more than talk, but to watch the Holy Spirit work on them. And then, I've been in meetings with some of the people I've mentioned. I didn't say a word. All of a sudden, so Tim, explain this to me. I'm a pretty good guy. I treat everybody right. But you're telling me that a rapist who prays to God on his deathbed or before he's executed gets into heaven and I don't? You don't know how many times I've heard that brought up to me. I haven't even started the conversation.
Yeah.
Is that a word? And I'm like, Holy Spirit, you are at work. You are working in this.
So let's
life.
work. Let's go to work. Here we go.
Yeah, come
We're in.
on. That's a step. That's a step. You're thinking.
Yeah.
You're thinking. You're considering. I'm like, I get so jazzed about that. I'm like, man, that's beautiful. And even if it takes 35 years, and that's relational. 35 years that's a strong relationship. And
Yeah.
so if we don't hang around, we don't get those. So
Yeah. No, I love that. And maybe there's a little bit of an invitation here in your story to everybody who's listening to think about how we met Jesus and what was going on, right? And to reconsider it and go, maybe this is not just a one-time part of our story, but maybe that's like something that God has put in our DNA.
Yep.
Yeah.
I totally believe that. It's not that you're trying to capture your youth at all. It's that part of the kingdom that enthused you early on. And it's probably, if I can use the term primitive, at least it's in its nutshell form for you as you're first come to know Christ. It's not blown up yet. But man, it's so exciting to see one friend, one person trust you enough to say something like, I don't get it. I mean, if they really didn't want it, they wouldn't say they didn't get it.
Yeah.
So they're struggling with it, which means I've been invited into it, which is freaking amazing. And I mean, man, that's like, what an honor to be invited into somebody's process like that. That's it. I mean, I
love that.
That's gold. And that goes back to what Christ did for me, in the same way as what was I? Surfer, getting ready to get married. Good thing I got saved before we got married. Really good.
Yeah.
And so,
well, let me ask one more question about that. The guy who led you to the Lord, do you still know him?
Oh yeah.
Do you guys still surf?
He's a marathon runner now and a bike racer. He doesn't surf anymore, but get this, the guy that prayed for me and prayed with me to begin my Christian journey has prayed for me every single day since that moment. This guy is super disciplined. I mean, the guy's like a drill sergeant. And I call him almost every May 1st, and I go, Danny, thank you. Thank you so much. Because I didn't do anything. I'm just a worm. I'm like, no, you're not. You are the voice of God to me.
Yeah.
And thank you. And he says, I pray for you. He calls me Timmy. He goes, I pray for you, Timmy, every day, every single day.
Amazing.
And he wouldn't lie. He'd tell you the truth. And we're still in touch.
That is so good. I love stories like that.
His sons are very close. They come to our church. And
Man, too good. Well, Timmy, let me transition this one more time. I know that you planted your church, you pastored it for a long time, and I know that maybe less than a year ago you transitioned your church. You retired, you gave it to a new pastor. I want to talk about that maybe just for a minute here, because like the Vineyard is in this spot where a lot of people are transitioning.
Yep.
And this is not uncommon. People plant churches, and then eventually you got to give it away if you want it to stay alive, right?
Right.
So when did you start thinking about transitioning? How many years before you let go of your church were you thinking, I need to figure this out?
I started thinking about it a long time ago. I'm talking maybe 10, 12 years ago when I was in my late 50s, maybe. Started reading, journaling, praying, gathering information. And then I started talking to the board probably when I was about 62, 61. I had planned to work till I was 70. That was my plan. And so I started feeding them books. There's not that many books out there about transition, which is a shame. But Vanderbloemen's got a little one that's pretty good. So we would read the books together. And when we had a board meeting, we would talk about what it looks like. And then 2 and a half years ago, I realized I needed to pull this trigger, that if I didn't actually put the wheels in motion, we were just going to keep talking about it. So we read and studied for probably 10 years. And we did have Vanderbloemen come and do a survey through our church and looked at the staff, looked at the church, and it was helpful. But there's no way, God bless them, but there's no way I'd ever let them pick a pastor for our church. and they just don't know the vineyard
Yeah.
well at all. And they're good people, and so we started. The day I posted on the vineyard website was like, oh my gosh, it was one of those days when I went, it's like I had this debate, Tim, you got to do it. You got to do it. I'm like, but I don't want to do it. Like, what's it going to be like? I don't know. I was like,
will anybody answer? Will the people who answer be crazy people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
All the
some
things.
did. Some were. You wouldn't believe some of the things we got.
I'm sure.
Woo. But, and there were some friends in the vineyard that told me before I advertised to let them look around. And so they did, and they shot some people to me, and it looked hopeful, but in the end, it just didn't work out. So I said, I'm going to post it.
Yeah.
So I just grabbed my hand and I forced it. And I made a little video because I'd planned to do something about transitioning, helping other pastors. And I'd said in it, man, today was a rough day. I mean, I posted that we are going to find another pastor.
Yeah.
And so for a year, Adam, we interviewed people. I mean, we talked to some wonderful people, very capable people all around the world, from South Africa to here to there, vineyard people, wonderful people. And it was getting so confusing that I may be jumping ahead here, but I said, Lord, I really need a word. I need something to help. And finally, because the vineyard thing was big to me, finally these words, and this goes back to the beginning.
Yeah.
He said, find someone who loves Myrtle Beach the way you do. And that was it. And so I wrote it in my journal. I said, all right, this was my field. I joke about it. This is my beach. I mean, I've been here all my life, and this is my beach. Who do you want to hand this off to that loves this place? And let me take care of whatever happens after that. But find someone who cares about the field you're planted in. And so someone mentioned this young guy, Tommy, to me and said, let me set up a lunch for you. We went to lunch, and it was good. Middle of the pandemic, so it was really weird, which added a whole nother dimension to the thing. But about 6, 8 months to a year, prayed through it. Finally, the board said, we think he's the guy, And he lives right here in Myrtle Beach. We already had a kind of a Bible study that had blown up to 150 people. He was just leading in on like a Monday night, 40-year-old guy. And so that was the next big step. It's like offer him the job,
Yeah.
and that was huge. And so
did that feel scary? Like, because then it's kind of like official, right?
Oh man, it was really scary. I had another vineyard. I called 5 other vineyard pastors who had transitioned before I did any of this, and wrote down what they told me and all of that. And they were very helpful. But one of them said, man, you're going to hurt more than you know. I was like, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
He really kind of colored it in a really painful way. And it's been painful, but it's been beautiful too.
Yeah. So let me just dig on that. Like, what's painful? Is it just painful not preaching every week?
Yeah, I enjoy preaching, but I think it's more the routine of like that. I love research. And so having that week when I can lock myself in the house and pull out all the books or the office there, and just surround myself with books for 3 days, and go at it and dig it out. And you only share maybe 5% of what you studied, but the process I loved. And I did love being able to be there for people when they were having a tough time. That's a very holy thing to me. And it's a very sacred thing to be invited into those moments when people are going through loss or struggles. So, but I mean, that's continuing just in a different kind of gathering now.
That's right.
But,
yeah. You're going to go do the send off on the way, right? Like it's different church, different room.
It is. And another thing, in all honesty, is when you're sitting there in church and you're hearing the new guy and you go, oh man, I wouldn't have said that, or wait a minute, he's missing the point. Why did he say this? All of that's coming out. And then you hear the Lord go, dude, really? I mean, would you just enjoy the service? Like sit here and enjoy it. Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's right. That's right. But you said painful, but you also said beautiful. What's been beautiful so far?
Well, what's beautiful is to watch Tommy, to see how excited he is. and the fact that what he has wanted in his life has now occurred. This is what he was wanting to get to. He didn't know how to get there. And so watching him and listening to him talk about, every time we get together, I go, "Are you happy?" He says, "Man, I've never been so happy in my life." I'm like, "Gosh, Tony, that's great."
That is good.
Yeah. And because he knew so many people, church has blown up, even in the pandemic. I mean, they're going to have to do something. I mean, they're busting the walls out. There's so many people coming.
That's so beautiful.
Well, yeah.
And you know what? And I don't know Tommy, and so I don't even know your all story all that well, but I can't help but realize that, like you said, Tommy was, before this, he was just leading a Monday night Bible study on his own, and there's a bunch of people there. I mean, it sounds very organic. It has some resonances with your story, right?
And that wasn't lost on him. He said the same thing when they would come over to the house and we were talking. He goes, Tim, I can see some similarities here. I'm like, yeah, I can too.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, he was a youth pastor for a while. He'd never been a senior pastor. And but his connection with people in the community as far as teaching the Bible and all, that is something that doesn't come along very often with people. I mean, I thought it was a real gift. Some other churches looked at him and turned him down. They didn't even give him the chance. And I was like, man, this is so much the vineyard. Let's find somebody with a fire, because as Wimber said, it's so much easier. You can't start a fire in someone. You could kill yourself to do that. But if you can find someone with a fire, build a fireplace around it. Let the heat come. And
that's
so,
wisdom.
And
that's
so he's a good guy. He's a good man, and he's doing a good job.
Man, well, Tim, thank you for just telling that story, because I think we need more stories like this in our movement, and just anybody who's doing church. I think we need more stories like yours of people who've done ministry for a really long time, but then also people who have done the brave thing and handed their baby to someone else.
Yeah.
We need to hear that.
Yeah, and another thing, I've got to say this to give credit to a group of people, is the board worked with me with that, but also my wife and my children were amazing through this. I mean, they all said, "We want more of you." My kids told me that. They're like, "Dad, when are you going to be able to be free? When are you going to retire so that we can have you and so the grandkids can have you?" I mean, that was a constant refrain for a couple of years. And I think I finally heard it for what it was, which is an amazing gift to me, and that I needed to honor.
Yeah.
And it's been beautiful. They have taken advantage of it.
That's good. I mean,
so
even before we got on this call, you said you'd just been hanging out with the grandson.
Yeah, every week, so, yeah.
That's
beautiful.
Good. I know one of the gifts in my life is, like, my parents live in town and Heather's parents live in this town. And so to be able to raise our kids with all other grandparents, it's that's not a small gift. That's a really big gift.
And we can take it for granted as pastors as we blitz through life. Like, they're there, I'll be there at the party. And you do everything you can, and you think you've done such a great job that PKs aren't PKs. Like, we tried hard for our kids just to be ordinary, normal kids, but you don't realize what's happening when they're in that, that environment, the expectations that others have, and that kind of stuff. And so to be able to spend some good years, with them and not be rushed and not have to go to another meeting it is a wonderful gift. Absolutely is. So,
well, Tim, let's land it here. Maybe two more questions.
All right.
Let's just go like Father Sage moment here. We have a word in the vineyard for people who are in your seat. We call them sages.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I like that word. It feels good.
It just means you're old.
I don't know. I think it's cooler than that. I think sage is actually, from my seat, sage is cool. It's a cool word. I don't know who started it. Maybe Phil. I don't know, but it's cool.
I think Phil started it. Yeah.
Yeah. You got your sage hat on. What do you want to say to young worship leaders and maybe even young pastors?
I think I've said that already in some ways, and that is knowing yourself well enough. Because if you don't know who you are, then any old you'll, that's who you'll be. And I honestly would encourage you to to find out who you are with your giftings. I don't mean taking some spiritual gift inventory. I'm talking about looking deep inside, finding the fire, finding out why you started this walk, and are you at a place where that can flourish in your life? And not, it takes some work to even find that, I'll be honest with you. And so that, and never, if you do lose the fire and the love for Christ that he captured you with, please pull back long enough to go get it again. Spend some time with Christ, find someone to, to mentor and pray for you. I've had people in my life all through these 50 years. I've had different people who have always been there for me whenever I found myself in a dry spot, and really needed help. That's the thing I would say. Know yourself, well enough, because Jesus is going to be faithful. The Holy Spirit's going to be there, not going to bail on you. He's not going to turn his back. He's not going to say, dude, what was I thinking when I thought of you? It's not going to happen. It's not, and so that's not going to happen. You can have confidence in that. But knowing yourself as you process and work in this thing, which is a holy calling, it is, and a holy journey for anyone, wherever you are, knowing yourself will save you a lot of pain in the long run.
I'm listening, Tim. I'm listening.
Saying no. Being able to say no.
There's a lot there.
That the counselor helped me with that. She told me one time, she said, every time you say yes, you said no to something else. What was it you said no to? What was it? Oh, wow. Usually don't think about it. I'm just on to the next thing. And knowing yourself and how healthy. Sometimes you don't know how healthy you are. You need to ask your spouse or a friend, someone who knows you.
Yeah, it's interesting. We, in knowing ourselves, it's really a journey into vulnerability, because we have to trust that question to other people in order to get a view of ourselves.
Yes.
It's an invitation into a new kind of vulnerability and being brave enough to ask someone, hey, how do you think I'm doing? What do you see in my life? And then also, again, it's another kind of vulnerability. Nobody can heal themselves.
Nope.
So if we are dry, or if we're broken, or if our pain is to the surface and we're just kind of drowning, like, somebody's got to help us.
I want to say amen to that in a huge way.
Yeah.
Because so many of us will keep going around the block thinking it's going to change. It's going to change. It's going to change. Year, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 25 years. And there's bits and pieces of you falling off all through those years until, with God's grace, you go, wait a minute, I'm not doing this right. And my prayer for young pastors and leaders, worship leaders, all would, man, please come get to know yourself and how God made you.
Yeah.
And keep that healthy, as best you can. So.
All right, y'all, listen up. That's a word from Father Tim. I'm listening to that one. All right, Tim, one more, and we'll wrap it here. What are you dreaming about? What's keeping your heart alive? What are you dreaming about right now?
Well, when we first started this conversation, one, of course, is my grandkids, who, gosh, I love them so much. The other thing is that original community I started out following Jesus because of, in other words, those friends in the surfing community, those friends and musicians and people that I've known all my life around here, and there's others too that I'm just getting to know now. I dream, like that one friend I told you about, I dream of the day, whether it's me or it's somebody else, for him to say, you know what, I get a little of this, Tim. I prayed today. And that, man, in that community, that's huge.
Yeah.
And there it is happening. I'm watching it happen again. 70s, we saw thousands of people come to Christ in the surfing community around here. It was amazing. And so I know it can happen. I've seen it before. And so that's my dream. My dream. Yeah. I walk into surf shop, and everybody's like, oh man, Tim, I was reading the Bible today. And this, what do you think about it?
That's right.
So
that's right. Well, that's beautiful. May it be, Lord.
Amen.
Tim, thanks for telling your story.
Thank you, Adam, for inviting me on here. I appreciate it.
You are so welcome. And listen, you can come back here anytime you want, and maybe we should just do a whole podcast on surfing.
So, hey, anytime.
Maybe you should just start one. All right, everybody.
Okay.
Thanks for listening. Peace.
Hey everyone, Casey Corum here, producer of the podcast. Thanks for listening. As always, if you've been enjoying the podcast, here's a few ways you can help us. First of all, leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Also, connect with us on social media, Instagram at the Ferment Podcast and Twitter at FermentCast. All right, everyone, thanks for listening. See you next week. Peace.